You're listening to Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose, a new conversation space where educators and leaders explore what it truly means to lead with purpose, courage, and heart. Join Dr. Nathan Manley and myself, Jim Cummins, as we share the inspiration behind Lifted and how purpose-driven leadership can transform schools and communities. This is Beyond the Bell, Leading with Purpose. Today's conversation is one I think many school leaders will connect with because we're going to talk about trust, transparency, financial stewardship, and what it means to keep students first when leaders have to make difficult decisions. Today, we're honored to welcome Dr. David McGehee. Dr. McGehee brings more than 35 years of experience in education. He has served as a teacher, administrator, consultant, and superintendent, including superintendent roles in Sparta, Raymore Peculiar, Lee Summit, and most recently, Emporia Public Schools. He's also served in a variety of consulting and leadership roles, including work as an education consultant, principal consultant with Prairie Advisors Group, and associate with School Exec Connect, and national director of educational programs for Global Learning Accelerator, where his work focused on changing the way individuals learn and helping develop design thinkers prepared to solve complex challenges. What stands out to me about Dr. McGehee is his breadth of experience. He has led large systems, worked with significant budgets, supported program development, stepped into interim business operations work, and helped districts think through difficult decisions with clarity and care. In Emporia, he has led very openly through a challenging financial season. In a message to staff, he named the reality of declining enrollment, funding loss, and the need to reduce expenditures, while also reminding people that panic is not the answer. His message was clear. Challenges can become opportunities when people communicate well, understand the impact, and work toward the best possible result. He's also written about trust as a key performance indicator, the idea that trust should be measured and protected with the same seriousness as other district outcomes. That's a powerful leadership idea and one I think our listeners will appreciate. Dr. McGehee, welcome to the show. Would you like to give us kind of a little bit of your journey into education?
Sure. Well, I appreciate you guys having me on, Jim and Nathan. When you reached out to me, I'm like, I don't know that I'm really relevant over there in Missouri anymore, but you're right. The challenges are the same from place to place. We might distribute the money a little differently over in Kansas, but I think the goals and of how to distribute it and then the financial challenges that everyone's facing are the same on both sides of the state line. I ended up in Emporia now after kind of being out of the superintendent's chair since 2016. A lot of people know my story. I don't mind telling it, but I had a long career in Missouri, 29 years. Started in small districts like a teacher in Drexel. I was an administrator in Sparta down in Southwest Missouri. That's where you kind of learn how to do it all in the small school districts. It really benefited me to start in the small districts. I learned how to work with the team and delegate when I went through Raymore Peculiar as superintendent. I learned a lot there. It prepared me to be the superintendent in a big system like Lee Summit, where we were mostly experiencing growth, right? So different from what I've got going on here in Emporia. I don't know how many people that might be listening today have run into a tough board member along their journey. I always felt like, man, people would tell me stories about tough board members. Like, I get along with all my board members. I don't understand this. I've never had an issue with a board member. Well, into my career in Lee Summit, I had a board member that had his own ideas and decided that he wanted to go a different direction. And eventually, I chose to step away from that situation, even though I was planning on retiring from there in about 3 years and having a great young leader, Brent Blevins, step in and take over. It kind of all fell apart there right toward the end. Unfortunately, didn't get out of there fast enough. Social media, news media, so on follows you around. I was finalist for a lot of jobs in Kansas after that. But you can't blame boards for, regardless of what they know about the situation, it's hard for them to necessarily take a chance on somebody and they don't know how the community is going to receive them based on what's out there in the news media. Um, so I consulted for a while, and then had that interim business role opportunity down here in Emporia that popped up on a Wednesday, and I was working in Emporia the following Monday. So it was like no real time to think about it. You're either going to step back in and do it, or you're not going to do it. Rented a tiny little place for $500. It was just a place to put my bed and a small kitchen, and did that for 6 months. But um, I'm a firm believer in the fact that there's a higher power that knows better for us than we know for ourselves. And I think I was put in that situation for a reason. And so this position opened up to start the school year, and I applied for it. And it was the same Board of Education. They knew me. I had built trust with them already, and it's been a great opportunity, and a great feeling to be back in the chair. And I certainly have a different mindset about it today than I did toward the end of my career in Missouri. I don't think people understand the blessing that having the opportunity to sit in this chair and lead school districts and impact others and help others develop and just have an impact on kids. They don't understand it, especially those kind of year 20 through 30, when things start to, they get tired and challenges have racked up. But I really think the difficulty along the way has really shaped how I lead today, and I think I'm a lot calmer, less emotional person in the chair today, and just kind of see my role differently, and appreciate it. I walk through my garage door every morning, and you know thankful for the blessing to get to go do it.
Yeah, that's I mean that's awesome because I can relate a little bit to that. Once you're not in it, you see the world differently. And working with other schools, you see the way they do things, and just that it is a blessing. And I think as you touched on kind of your leadership changing over time, but we always like to kind of start our sessions with a little bit of who influenced you? What person role did really kind of help form your early leadership foundation?
Yeah, I think anytime I'm asked that question, I always have to go back. One of the people I have to mention is Coach Ken Gibler. I played some small college football at Missouri Valley College, and I can remember Coach Gibler coming to my school when I was a senior in high school, and no one had ever gone to college from my family. There was no real emphasis for me to really do anything but find a job, right? And he came along and recruited me to go play some football, and made me believe that I could go do that it was something that could be in my journey, my path. And he was just a great example of a leadership of men in his particular situation. But I learned a lot from him. Um, so I would say early on, that's probably one of the folks. I learned a lot from the people who actually worked with me. I don't like to use the word under me. I don't like to use the word boss. We're all a part of a team. But coming through places like Raymore Peculiar and Lee Summit, I ran into a lot of great experienced folks that helped to kind of shape my thinking, and I learned from them along the way. Too many people to even mention by name.
Yeah. Nathan, you want to get us into the meat?
Yeah, Dr. McGehee, it's an honor to have you, and I appreciate you sharing your journey and your story. As I was looking into stuff, one of the things that you talk about is trust as a key performance indicator, or a KPI, and that really stood out to me. So I wonder, for the listeners, if you could tell us, what do you mean by trust as KPI, and why is that so important in school leadership?
Yeah, I kind of got that idea. I was reading a book by Corey Shear, who's actually a local author there in the Kansas City area. I think he lives in the Liberty School District. He wrote a book on trust, and it really hit home for me that, you know, trust is a key performance indicator. It means you can't just take it for granted, right? You might think you're doing all the right things and that people are trusting you, but that it really has to be intentional. It has to become a part of your strategic plan.
Mm.
You know, you have to have goals around it, and then, you know, action steps and behaviors that are around that particular goal, and just be very intentional. And then you have to measure it. You know, we do climate surveys here, in the Emporia Public Schools. They've been doing them every other year. You know, I didn't start them, but it was really telling though to read some of the climate surveys that we got back in the early fall, because I'm kind of new in my tenure, but we were already developing based on just involving people in tough decisions already, because we had to jump into some hard budget work right away. Doing what you say. People were already, you know, you could tell from the feedback on that climate survey, people were already realizing that we are intentional about building trust, and that you know, we do want them to be a part of our journey. We got some really good feedback from them.
That's good. I mean, that's so much wisdom in there, and the accountability, the measuring piece. You talk about the tough decisions. So, how do leaders protect trust when the decisions are difficult?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just making sure that you provide all the information, right? I think that there's a tendency for school districts sometimes just to talk about what they're doing well, but I think where you really build the trust is to be willing to talk about what you're not doing so well, where you need to help to improve, being willing to ask for help. So that's a part of it. And then, you know, like for us working through challenges, um, you know, you need to involve your stakeholders. We have our, you know, we create when we are tackling a challenge, we create a charter for every challenge, and that charter outlines exactly what the goal is of this team that's going to be put together to tackle the challenge, who's going to be a part of it, what our decision making parameters are. We have a process that we develop that we can trust and that we know is going to occur every time. And that's kind of what we did with our budget reductions. Is, you know, we had parents from every school attendance area. We had teachers, we had counselors, we had administrators, you know, just community members from all around the community of Emporia involved in that process. So, you know, I really think it's about involving people in the process, letting them be a part of deciding what solutions should look like, helping you determine, you know, what's important. Because I'm new to the community, right? I don't walk in here. What's important to me might be totally different from what's important to the folks in Emporia. What matters is that we do what's important to the folks of Emporia, not what's important to me.
Yeah.
One of the, oh, go ahead, Nathan.
Well, no, I was going to say, I mean, you and I we did the leadership luncheon, and the last one, or one of them, was focused a lot on that trust. And there's some research out there that like trust, especially in schools and government overall, is like at an all-time low on it. So I love what you're saying and what you're doing there, and how important that is for leaders to understand. Is like, it's not even 10, 15, 20 years ago when an educator walks in the room, like we have trust. And so there's just with the climate and culture, everything, it's understanding that trust has to be strategically built. It has to be part of your strategic plan. And there's just, if you're ignoring that piece, then I think you're really missing the boat. It's understanding that in yourself and building that in your district, and teaching maybe even your leaders how to build trust, because people are coming to us as skeptics. Would you
Yeah,
would you add anything to that?
yeah, I agree. And, you know, and building your team, you know, and helping them to understand how to build trust and have people trust in them as well. That's something I found. You know, there was a lot of there was a lot of fear to share and be transparent and be open about everything here, right? It
Yeah.
was almost as though, you know, people were kind of sometimes being told what to say and what not to say. And I think that, you know, a month or two in, like I had a board member say, I already can feel the difference in this district office building, that you know, that tense air has been allowed out of it. People are more comfortable and so on. So you have to model it for them, right? And then
Yeah.
it becomes contagious. If You lead with trust as a KPI. You work through tough issues with a calm approach and manner. Your team will start to do that as well. So I think you can develop your people and help them to understand the importance of it as well.
That's good.
One of the things that I think is so impressive is usually trust takes time. And if you're already sensing it in the climate surveys in the very short time that you've been there, that's powerful because trust is usually earned over cycles of doing what you said you were going to do, and people
Yeah.
see that over time, and they get that trust. So your approach in the beginning must have been really solid to immediately be able to get them to feel that. And I would encourage um, leaders that are listening, maybe that are stepping into places where they're having to rebuild trust, that this is encouragement that it doesn't take 2 years to build that trust. You can put some things in place immediately, and I think a large part of that may go back to the fact that you've included so many people. I think I read somewhere 80 people were involved in your budget planning. Is that the part that they were?
Yeah, the cost containment team, yes.
Yeah. So,
I can't help
well,
but even think that, you've made it a performance indicator, but like, doing what you say, like, part of that is modeling trust as well. I can't help but think like, the empathy that you're probably modeling and teaching and understanding others' point of view, but at the same time, just letting people know, I trust you, right?
Yeah,
I have to
yeah,
I have to imagine that's part of what's being modeled every day.
exactly. I don't, I'm not, I don't need to be in every meeting in every room where a decision's being made. You build if you build your team and focus on the right things, great decisions are being made whether you're in the room or not. I think that's real important. And yeah, so I don't have my thumb on people here. It's taken them a while to get used to, like, they don't need to come down here and share everything with me before they go make a decision, because maybe a little bit different than what they experience, and everybody does it differently, right? Everyone's comfortable doing it differently. This is just the way that I feel like I've done it for a long time, but certainly in this role, try to emphasize it even more. And it, if you just be open and honest with people and give them the full picture of everything you talk to them about, I think about my board. My board has trusted me to the point of I can feel them being uncomfortable in their chairs when I ask them, "Can we do it this way?" But they're trusting me, even though they may feel a little uncomfortable because we've never done it that way, to to let us do it. They they have had 2 board meetings a month in Emporia, Kansas forever. We are transitioning in June, July to 1 board meeting per month. We'll do 4 work sessions over the course of the year that have specific purposes, but to get them, that's like a huge shift for my board. We couldn't have done that without just being real open and honest from the beginning about everything, so that when we got to things like that, they trusted you to just, yep, we trust you. Let's try it.
that's
Very good.
awesome. Well, you mentioned cost containment. I kind of want to move that direction, but one of the things in the session yesterday we talked about a lot was some decision matrices and the political cost versus what you're financially saving and some of those type of things. So I think one of the things that this should drive home to every leader out there is you need your community to help you understand those political costs that you may be venturing into when you start uh, dialing back programs or personnel, whatever it is. So you stepped into Emporium, were quickly faced with significant cost containment work. What have you learned about leading through financial challenges in a way that still honors people and keeps focus on students?
Yeah. Um, again, it's show them everything. Make sure that they have access to the data that you have. You don't need the power. You need to give your team the power, right? to make decisions. We start. I leaned back on a process that I had used in Lee Summit in 2008, 2009. I mean, this isn't the first time that we've had financial challenges. That was probably the first time that was that significant for me in my career, where we were cutting tens of millions of dollars out of that budget in Lee Summit, and we used a similar process. So I just leaned back on that process. I knew that if I got people involved and we took our time and we set the stage and gave them the context, that they would help us make the best decisions. I think that's we created like we had a Google Drive where there was a folder where anyone in the community could look at the information that we were doing meeting by meeting by meeting. So you weren't left out just because you weren't in the meetings. We were doing lots of communication and so on, but all the information we were looking at, the agendas, everything was right there available for folks to see. And so I think being real transparent, and there's been a few things mentioned here already in other contexts that we looked at when we went into developing our charter for this group. Like, what are our guiding principles for this group going to be? We set those ahead of time. And so we looked at every idea that comes up, you have to measure it for its value. Is it really going to save that much money versus its impact? We measured it for its feasibility. How difficult is it going to be to actually implement it? How long is it going to take to implement it? Is it going to save enough? You start combining those guiding principles to decide whether to do it or not. Risk, you referenced it in a different way. What's the stakeholder impact? What is the risk of making this decision? I mean, we're going to close a school in 27, 28, an elementary school. There was a lot of risk and stakeholder disruption and emotion involved in that conversation and that decision. While we say we're going to, there's still an opportunity for the community to appeal to the State Board of Education to review that. But I don't expect the state board will see the data that we've shown them and say that it isn't necessary based on our finances. We wanted to look at reducing positions through attrition, but then I had a board member who didn't really like the word attrition, and so I came up with the word empathy, because that's really what that is, right? Empathy. We want to be empathetic as we make these cuts to try to make sure that everyone that wants a job has a job. It might not be in the same building they were in before. It might not be in the exact same role they were in before, but that everyone has a job. So we used empathy as a part, and then just mission focused, limit the student impact to the extent possible. The fewest number of students programmatically don't impact them. So those were our guiding principles in our whole cost containment process.
Mhm.
So how here's a question that I could see a young or even a veteran superintendent, but somebody that's not had to go through these cuts. When you say we provided all of the information, a lot of times we're dealing with numbers and ratios, students to teachers, and magnitude. No, a lot of lay people maybe don't understand the magnitude of the cut. So as you said, we're gonna present all this in a Google Drive. How did you help lead so that what you were sharing was digestible, understandable to the lay person out there that wasn't in the meeting? What advice would you have for clarity on what you shared, but not so much that they're like, oh, I
Yeah,
just can't get it.
yeah. I mean, you kind of have to overshare, right? Especially when you're thinking about someone's going to look at this and they weren't in the room to hear the conversation. And so, when we started we created a list of every position in our district, how many of those there were, what the average salary, so for everything. But what does that mean to someone? They don't know what a student support strategist does, or they don't know what does an instructional coach do. I know what my teacher in my classroom does. I don't know what all these other things do. And so we shared not full page job descriptions, but brief job descriptions of what they do, how they impact our operations. And so I think it's just keeping in mind to be sure to share enough information so that, like you said, someone who's not in the room hearing the discussion can understand it. And then we started off putting things in context. So a lot of our early information wasn't decision making. It was setting us up to the point to have the information to then dive into the decision making. And so all of that context material, is in that folder as well. And so you just try to, if people don't believe you have a problem, then they're not going to be that interested
Right.
in solving the problem. But when you can show them that, folks, we're going to spend $2 million more this year than we did last year. We only have about $11 million in reserves, and 7 million of that is at-risk funds, which is very restricted on how you can spend it in Kansas. We're looking at losing 400 students off the formula next year, which is another $2.4 million. Like we got to come up with $4.5–5 million here over a course of 2 years. And I don't know if we quite made it all the way there. We're evaluating now all the decisions to say, okay, because we were using averages and a lot and so on. But now you're down to, okay, we know exactly who's hired for next year, who's not, and so on. So we're kind of working through that. We're probably deficit spend some again next year, but we would have no money left in Emporia by the end of the 29-30 school year if we hadn't done something.
Yeah, what a challenge. And I just reminding leaders that when you get into this budget cut time, it's often what's not outside of the business office and those that manage the money. It's emotional decisions, not dollar decisions. And so I think your approach with sharing and getting people involved and trying to get in front of the emotional side of it is just critical because
Yeah, you
they
can't
they,
you can't
they don't care
eliminate the
about dollars.
emotions. Yeah, you can't eliminate the emotions from the situation, right? I mean, I'm standing in front of my board giving a presentation on why we should close this elementary school. That's emotional for me. It's hard. It's hard to do that. And some people are out there thinking you're just a cold, callous person and you don't care. Others understand how hard it is for you because they they get it. But at the end of the day, it does come down to the data sometimes. When you're talking about financial sustainability, you don't always get to make the decisions you want to make. That you can't always protect students in every way that you want to, or teachers in every way that you want to. So that's why it was important to involve so many people to help, because they could tell me, is it more important to have this instructional coach, or is it more important to have this student support strategist? You know, they can tell me which one would impact more if we reduced it.
Hmm. Yeah, have some ownership.
Well, and I think the other thing is just uh, listening and is the courage, you know, and that's tough sometimes, and we don't always see that. And so, but kudos to that courage it takes up and that inner peace. I know I wrestle with it sometimes. It's like, did I choose courage or coward today? Um,
Yeah, it's hard, right? I'm a natural introvert. I mean, I was raised by a single mother. I was taught to be afraid of my own shadow for a period of my life. I mean, my whole career has been, be a chameleon, be what you need to be at the moment in time. But you you're right. It does, like, just internally, it's okay to feel uncomfortable about something. It's okay to be super anxious about a presentation you have to make, or a meeting you have to have, or whatever. It's okay. I mean, I've been doing this 35 years. I still get anxious and uncomfortable about it. Um, but you at the end of the day, I am responsible here, and this has to get done. So you buckle it up and do it.
hmm, that's good.
I want to just because we're probably going to have to jump to a new topic, but I want to just before we leave this, superintendent out there that wants to do this, get people involved. Sometimes in my career, I ran into situations where we wanted people involved and nobody showed up, or two people showed up. So do you use any specific techniques? How did you get people to engage with you in this work? And I'm not talking about your leadership team. I'm talking about
Yeah,
parents and community
right.
members.
Yeah. Well, like when I was trying to find my parents to serve, I didn't know any of them yet because this is happening, a month in the chair. And so I try to lean on the people within the system that know them the best and can really implore upon them the importance of service and kind of have that relationship piece. And then didn't accept no for an answer. I mean, I had a principal or two that they were having a hard time finding a parent, that would come and do this. I said, guys, there we got to have them. You can't say I can't find anyone. And so
Mm.
sometimes you can't accept no for an answer because that if you don't have somebody from this particular elementary attendance area on the team, and all of a sudden you do something that affects them, you're going to hear about it. And so, yeah, I think you know I had to ask my board members for help in recruiting community members because I didn't know who the people were to approach yet. I didn't have relationships, and so I think lean on others that maybe have closer relationships with the folks you want on the team, and not always just make that be a task that you alone trying to do.
Yeah, I think one of the misconceptions sometimes is people have the feeling that the more people you include, the slower the process is. And I would argue that the more people you have, the fewer missteps maybe that you have to clean up or go back and fix because you had a lot more involvement. You didn't have quite as much risk to step out and then have to go backwards. So
Yeah,
great
and
stuff.
you remind me of another book, The Procrastinator's Guide to Leadership, and it says take all the time you have to make a decision. And a lot of people want to make quick decisions, right? We took 6 to 7 months to process this. I knew we were going to take so long that if we decided to close a school, it was going to be too late to close it for next fall. But I was willing to accept that we could do it the following year and kind of you know transition into all the savings. But I'm a firm believer in taking all the time you have to make a decision because more and more data rises to the surface with time.
I like how, and I got a follow-up question to that, but I like how when they came to you and said they couldn't find anybody to challenge, you didn't just say okay or like, oh, go do it myself. You were like, yeah, this is gonna be hard. Go find somebody. We need him.
Yeah,
Like bringing
yeah.
that back to him. That's good. That seems subtle, but that's good.
So in that process, let's talk about when emotions got involved, your leaders, your parents. How did you work to keep them coming back to students first? What was the kind of the message? You talked about your
Mhm.
structure and those type of things, but how did you
Yeah.
keep bringing them back to?
Yeah. Well, we always put our guiding principles up there in front of them at every meeting, and it was right there, mission focus, limit student impact. So, it was always up front. But, you know, we broke this 80 member team down into three sub teams, and they all did the exact same work, just three different rooms to try to reach consensus on what to bring forward to the big room and then reach consensus there. And so in those small rooms is where those conversations were had, right? Well, if we do that, how is that going to impact the student? How is that, and we tried to avoid eliminating complete programs, right? We didn't want to take away opportunities from kids. And so that was a big piece. And then a part of the emphasis here, I've always tried to you just terminology can keep you focused on students, right? Instead of talking about all students, talk about each student. I always try to get people to replace the word all with each as often as they can. See their names and faces, not their numbers. And so just a part of your culture helps you to stay focused on students.
I love that each student or name a student. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
I like that and the reminder of those guiding principles and how important, and we work with leaders. Sometimes we talk about identity precedes activity or the beliefs before your behaviors. Otherwise, you got a whole bunch of behaviors and they end up shaping your beliefs and you didn't even know it. So if we can start with our belief and that shows us, or our principle, and that shows us the path, like um, I think there's some real power there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you want to keep your values up front all the time, right? You know, I always say, find opportunities to compromise without compromising your values. That's kind of how you get to the end
Good.
through a problem sometimes.
Yeah, whether it's an entire organization or starting with yourself or a small team or whatever it is. So, yeah, I mean, good stuff in that cadence to how you go through those processes.
I'm going to move to culture and positivity. So you've had to build the trust, which I think certainly is a culture builder without question. But you've always, as I came up through the ranks, you're one of the leaders us that we looked up to. But you
You're
always
saying
had,
I'm old.
well, I'm not saying that. I'm saying there were those of us that looked up to. But you always presented as um, not a rah-rah guy, but a guy that listened just but probably, I never had the opportunity to work with you, but I'm assuming you're one of those guys that is quiet, but when you have something to say, people listen. So being kind of in that same about not being a rah-rah guy myself, talk a little bit about how you build that culture, that positivity, being maybe more of a quiet leader. What does that look like for you? Because Nathan and I are convinced that culture has so much to do all the way down to student achievement. Because if you can build a system that people want to belong in, they're going to stay, they're going to be attracted to your district. So building that culture, that positivity, staff support, what's that look like for you?
Yeah. I think it's just consistent messaging, right? You can get people to believe in your vision, in their vision that we've collaborated on. You can get them to believe that they can do things without yelling and screaming and creating a show, right? Yeah, I struggle with like things like convocation, right? We're thinking about our back to school convocation already for next year, and we're in budget cuts, right? So we don't want to have some speaker that we're going to pay $10,000 to come in. So I'm the guy this year, right? I'm it. And I think about there's a part of me that first starts off to say, do I really have to motivate people to be excited about starting a new school year? Shouldn't they be motivated already? But they're not necessarily. But I'm not gonna get up there and perform in front of them. To me, it's just about being open, honest, being yourself. You can't early on in my football coaching, like I got tossed in my first job. I was a head coach of a small 1A school district, and I was a wide receiver. I didn't know anything about offensive line blocking and all that sort of thing. But all my coaches had yelled at me my whole career. So I thought maybe I don't yell enough. So I started yelling a little bit. It didn't work. I remember coming out of a timeout and yelling at the kids about this and that. I probably used some profanity and everything else and went back over to the sideline. And the very next play, the team runs a 40-yard touchdown against us. You know, so I said, like, okay, that doesn't work. I was trying to be somebody that I'm not. And so
Mm.
I would just encourage people, it's okay to be there's a lot of research starting to come out about just that quiet, calmer approach to leadership that should make folks like us feel a little bit better that we didn't do it wrong, that it was okay to do it that way and that you could still be effective that way. So yeah, you just have to be yourself. I mean, if you're an excitable person, be excitable and try to excite people that way. That's great. Try to know when to tone it down and so on. But if you're not that person, people are going to know you're faking it if you try to be that person. So I really think you lead with information, conversations, consist behavior, making yourself visible. I like to call it visibility with a purpose. Don't just go out to your schools so that people can see you. Go out there and find a way that you can be purposeful and help them be better, and you can learn from what you see. So I think all of those kinds of behaviors um, help people to follow you and to come along with you without having to be, this flamboyant kind of leader.
I think that's just gold. I don't I mean, just Good stuff.
And
Let's
in
talk.
my leadership team meetings, I I purposefully don't talk up front about issues because as soon as the superintendent gives their opinion on something, everyone else's opinion is your opinion. You have to let them,
Mhm.
you have to drag it out of them sometimes, but you don't want to be the first one to talk about an issue. Set the stage, get it on the table. Let me know what you guys think.
We always like to, and there's so much. We had so
Yeah.
many questions. We're not going to get through the whole list, but one of the things that we always try to include in our sessions is leadership well-being. Because if we're not well as leaders, our systems are not going to be well. So if you would share a little bit about your habits, routines, the things that you've learned over time. You talked about some of these decisions are heavy and the things that we have to do are carry a load. What is it that you've learned and how do you take care of yourself so that when you come, you can be your best version?
Yeah. You know, to me, that the biggest shift for me in that area is I take better care of myself while I'm at work than I used to.
Hmm.
I approach things with a little less, I'm not panicked about a situation. It's just a situation. We'll get through it. So just being calm at work and breathe from time to time when you need to. You know, someone's coming at you thinking something's a fire, help them to understand it's not a fire. That helps you relax about it too. So part of it's just approaching your work differently. You can take care of yourself at work, not just away from work, recharging away from work. Um, you know, I will be honest, you shared this question with me, and I I will be honest, I don't think that I found my groove away from work in Emporia just yet. Um, for one, I was retired from it for a while, right? And so it's taken some time for my body and mind just to get used to being on all day. Yeah. And so, I want to go home and jump on my bike or hit the gym or whatever like I used to, and I'm just tired. So I'm not doing a great kind of the way I'm recharging and help and taking care of myself right now is to just relax and not put any pressures on myself to be as into the fitness and so on as I used to be. But I want to get back there because that's been a part of my life. My whole life is, hit the gym 3 or 4 days a week, get on the bike, so on. I can't run anymore. I got two artificial hips these days. So, and unfortunately had the first one at the age of 47. So I've been
Oh
in that
boy.
boat for a long time. But yeah, I'm not a big book reader, although I will read. But when I read, it's for work, right? I read leadership things, stuff like that. I don't read for pleasure a lot. Um, I do a lot of Netflix streaming and things like that. I mean, those are the kinds of things that kind of help me just kind of relax in the evenings. But I definitely I definitely know, based on this extra Emporia 20 pounds, they say it's the Emporia 20. So I know I need to get back to some of those other things that also help me recharge and relax. It's just I haven't found my groove yet. I live away from my wife during the week. Sometimes she comes down here if we have events or things like that. But we also have a whole life up in Prairie Village, Kansas, too, up in the Kansas City area where I have golf club membership and stuff. So I'll do that on the weekends, get up there and make sure I get her. I was golfing 5 days a week, before I took this job. Now I'm lucky to golf 3 times a month. So, I try to get back up there and do that. But yeah, so I feel like I don't probably take quite as good care of myself away from the job as I used to, but I'm taking much better care of myself during the work day than I ever did.
Well, that's awesome. That's a good reminder that it's not just the things you do away from work. It's how you manage your days. So
Yeah.
good stuff.
Hey, as we wrap up today, what wisdom would you share with leaders who are trying to lead well through complexity while keeping students at the center?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it just goes back to, being yourself and staying calm, no matter how difficult the situation is. Involve people, let them help, lean on your assets around you. You have talented, knowledgeable people on your admin team, within your community, your board. I leaned on board members so heavily for things when I was in Lee Summit, that were super finance oriented and stuff like that. So, I just think don't try to do it by yourself. It's pretty easy advice that you hear a lot, but yeah, don't try to do it by yourself, and just but be yourself. Um, yeah, and lean on the folks around you, involve the folks around you. Just be open and honest and transparent. Again, trust as a KPI will help you a long ways in anything you're trying to accomplish as a leader.
Dr. McGehee, thank you for sharing your journey and your perspective with us today. Uh, the way you connect leadership, trust, transparency, even with the financial stewardship, but it goes back to how do you serve students, and we appreciate that. For our listeners, we hope today's conversation encourages you to think about trust not as a soft idea, but as a leadership measure that shapes culture, communication, and the ability to move through difficult work together. If your district is interested in sustained leadership coaching, systems work, financial support, or professional development, Nathan or I would be glad to visit with you about how Lifted can partner in that work. So until next time, be well and keep leading with purpose beyond the bell.